Ken Deeks here. Welcome back to Book by Book. We're working our way through the Messianic Psalms. Last time we were together, we started in Psalm 40, which we've titled The Messiah's Incarnation. We looked at the first 5 verses where David had expressed thanksgiving to God for his faithfulness, for his answering of prayer, and for his general goodness in his life. Now we come to verses 6 through 8, where David makes a pledge to lead an obedient life. So let's read these together, starting at verse 6. In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, but you have given me an open ear. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Then I said, behold, I've come in the scroll of the book. It is written of me. I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart. Now, later on, we're gonna be looking at these verses for probably a couple sessions. And later on in our study, we'll see that it's these 3 verses specifically that make Psalm 40 a messianic psalm, and where we begin to see a sense of, well, the incarnation, the allusions to the incarnation. Now, you might read this as we've just read it now and said, where is that? Well, just hang with me, and we'll see that in a later study. But for now, I want to focus on just a couple of words. I want to focus on this word sacrifice and this word offering. They're 2 different words in Hebrew. The word translated sacrifice in our English Bibles is the Hebrew word zeba, and the word translated offering is the Hebrew word minha. And the difference between the 2 is, whereas zeba or sacrifices were required, minha or offerings were voluntary. Now, I think it would be helpful if we got a bit of a breakdown on the general sacrificial system, and then we'll come back to these verses and we'll point something out. So here's a chart that delineates some of the sacrifices in the system, the Levitical system. So let's look at this chart. So in the first column, we have the name of the ritual, the purpose, what was offered, what happened to the blood, did the priest get any portion of the sacrifice, and then finally, did the offerer get any portion of the sacrifice? And then down the side, we have the actual names of the various rituals. So we have the sin offering and the reparation offering, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the communion offering. But what I also want to point out to you is I have broken them into these 2 categories of zeba, the required offerings, sin and reparation, and over here the voluntary offerings, burnt grain and communion. So let's just do a little survey here, and then we'll go back to the verses that we're considering, verses 6 to 8. So in the Levitical system, you had the sin sacrifice to atone for sin. That's the purpose. No brainer there. What did the offerer bring? Cattle, sheep, goats, or birds, depending on the economic status of the offerer. Obviously, birds were a lot less expensive than cattle. The blood would be smeared on the altar and then sprinkled inside. The priest would receive a portion of what was offered. This is one of the ways that the priests made living. You remember the Levitical priests did not have any land of their own, and so they depended on the others in the land to support them, and this is one way that they were supported. And with the sin offering, there's no portion that is consumed by the offerer. Okay, so the second required sacrifice is a reparation sacrifice, and the purpose here is to atone for an unintentional sin that for some reason required some kind of reimbursement to an offended party. So it's not something that you've done on purpose. Well, perhaps there was a sinful motivation behind what you've done. Maybe you wanted to make a little extra money or something, and in some way somebody got shortchanged. It wasn't really intentional, but it was motivated by your greed. And so there's an offended party involved. So what could be offered? Well, a ram could be offered. Money could also be offered. So perhaps the offended party would be, it's almost like it's almost like being sued, and the person that has been offended is given some kind of portion of money, some kind of a fee, and then whatever that fee was, 20% is given to the priest. Now, I don't know if it's 20% of the assessed amount that was paid or an additional 20% on top of that. That's not really clear, but that would go to the priest. The blood would be poured on the altar sides, and the priest would have a portion. So they would probably get the ram or a portion of the ram, and of course they get this 20% fee over here, and nothing is given to the lay person or the offerer in this case. Okay, so those are the required sacrifices. Then down here we have the voluntary ones, starting with the burnt offering. The purpose here is to receive general atonement and to express devotion. I think here of perhaps the Christian communion service, where we confess our sins in a kind of a general way. It's not that we're confessing anything specific, but just generally, it's an act of devotion and thankfulness to God, because I'm a bit of a creep. I'm a bit of a bad person. I do bad things, and God still loves me, and He takes care of me, and He forgives me, and boy, am I thankful for that. And so you would go to the temple when you're feeling thankful, and again, you would offer an offering according to your economic ability, and the whole animal is burnt. The blood is poured on all of the altar sites, and of course the priest gets no portion of it because the whole animal is burnt, and the offerer gets no portion of it either. Then we have the grain offering, and this is just to express thanksgiving to God for His blessing. So you receive a great blessing, perhaps a new child is born, or someone recovers from a serious illness, or the crops are particularly good that year. And so you might go to the temple just to give thanks to God, to say thank you. So you'd bake a cake, or you'd bake some bread, and you'd bring some wine. And unlike all of the other rituals, this is the only bloodless one. And the priests would get a portion, so they would get some cake, and they would get some bread, and they would get some wine. But again, the offerer gets nothing. And then the final voluntary offering is the communion offering. Some people like to call this the peace offering or the fellowship offering. I like the word communion. And the purpose of this offering is just to enjoy communion with God. and to express thanks to God for other people in your lives. Cattle, sheep, goats, blood is poured on the sides of the altar. The priest would get a portion, and the lay would get a portion. And notice that this is the only ritual on the list where the offerer participates in some way in consuming the offering. So, I mean, not to sound too profane, but basically we're talking about a big barbecue. You're talking about a great barbecue where the offering would be partially offered on the altar and then roasted, and it would be eaten in the presence of the priests, in the presence of the offerers, and in the presence of God, enjoying God's goodness, enjoying God's faithfulness. Now, this is going to form a very important background to what we read earlier in verses 6 to 8. Sacrifice and offering you have not desired. So, if God doesn't desire it, why do we have it laid out before us? Why do we have it commanded by the Lord our God? We're going to have to look at that in our next study. Our time is up for now. So until then, the Lord be with you.